So, Phil, this is a pretty powerful story that you did. A decorated 88-year-old U.S. veteran aviator from the Korean War recently made an unprecedented trip to North Korea to search for the remains of his wingman who died after a crash landing in 1950.
VOA correspondent Steve Herman accompanied Thomas Hudner on that trip and talked with me about the rare U.S.-North Korean interaction that he witnessed. Here's how his report on that trip begins.
As a U.S. Navy pilot during the Korean War, Thomas Hudner provided critical air support for Marines badly outnumbered by Chinese troops. 63 years later, one of those Marines, Silver Star recipient Dick Bonelli, joined Hudner in the quest to find his wingman, Jesse Brown.
Steve Herman in Tokyo, what's prompted this whole operation?
Well, essentially, it was the words that Thomas Hudner said to a dying Jesse Brown on the slopes of the Chosin Reservoir. Hudner and Brown, on December 4th, 1950, were flying single-engine Corsair fighters when Brown's plane lost power and crash-landed. Hudner crash-landed his plane after Brown crash-landed, trying to rescue Brown from his crumpled cockpit. He was unsuccessful, and as a Marine helicopter was coming to take Hudner away at dusk, he said, "We'll be back for you." So it's 63 years later, and Thomas Hudner, 88 years old, tried to make good on that promise he made to Jesse Brown.
We're on a mission, we're going to fulfill it, period. Right, Tom? That's right.
Hudner said that this search for Jesse Brown is more than just trying to find his remains. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We went to see a couple of damaged Corsairs at a North Korean military museum, and that brought back a lot of memories for Captain Hudner. But Hudner sees his return to the isolated country is not merely a quest to retrieve his wingman's remains.
And the more cooperation we get from former enemies, the better off the world will be. We've done this with a number of countries that have been bitter enemies of ours. They turned out to be some of our strongest supporters.
That seems very optimistic at this point because there's never been a peace treaty signed after the Korean War between the United States, which led the UN forces during the Korean War, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The two countries have no diplomatic relations, and the North Korean military on their tanks emblazoned on the front of all these armored vehicles is a phrase which says that the United States is their blood-sworn enemy.
Well, so if that's the case, why would North Korea allow this team to come in and search for the remains?
That's a very good question. They were saying that they were doing this for purely humanitarian purposes. Korean officers at a final meeting with Hudner asked for his team to return with the U.S. military's forensic experts. They also warned U.S. journalists not to imply North Korea agrees to such operations for financial benefit or to improve bilateral relations.
Well, tell me what it was like in North Korea as a journalist as you were following this team around.
We got to see places outside of Pyongyang that aren't on the typical agenda, and what was most fascinating to us was actually the drive from Pyongyang to get to Hyeongsan, north of the capital in Pyongan province. We went over a bridge that was buckling, and we were told that we could not come back the same way a couple of days later because that bridge had collapsed. So we were definitely off the beaten path, and we got to see glimpses of what I assume is typical life in North Korea that was in vast contrast to the scenes in the showcase capital, Pyongyang.
What did Hudner and what did Bonelli say to you at the end of this trip? How did you all leave it?
They considered it a success, even though that they would not be going to the Chosin Reservoir and that they would not be having any a personal encounter with leader Kim Jong-un, which they had also been expecting. It was, in many ways, a breakthrough. I'm not aware of any meeting like this before between officers of the KPA and private American citizens taking place in North Korea to talk about this type of search and retrieval operation.
Steve tells me the Americans were given a date in September to return, but Alex, with so many conditions for them to have to go back, that might be a little optimistic for them to go back into North Korea that soon. But we'll see.
Right. Well, we certainly do wish them the best in their
Absolutely.
quest.